Well, this might be good news. Lawmakers in Washington finally beginning to tackle a very libertarian issue that every American can get behind, ending the IRS's ability to seize your assets, even if you have done absolutely nothing wrong. Now, as you know, civil asset forfeiture was designed as a weapon to battle drug dealers and money launderers. But the problem is the laws allow the feds to take your stuff and keep it sometimes forever, even if you are never charged with a crime. And because of that, a lot of innocent people have been caught up in the dragnet, and they have no way to fight back. A bipartisan bill to end the IRS practice has passed through the House unanimously and is now heading to the Senate, perhaps later this week. But does it go far enough to end the insanity? Let me ask Nick Gillespie. He is the editor-in-chief of Reason TV and Reason.com. Nick, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Kennedy.
So let's talk about the IRS dipping their gooey fingers into all sorts of small business owners' cookie jars and taking money that doesn't belong to them from people who have not been charged with crimes. What does this legislation do?
What this legislation does is it says that if the IRS or if the federal government wants to seize your money through a tax lien or through a tax action, that you have to be charged with a crime at the very least. It would be better, I suppose, if you were also had to be convicted of a crime for them to keep the money. But asset forfeiture, civil asset forfeiture, is a it's a major issue in criminal justice reform because law enforcement departments at all levels, from the smallest kind of Barney Fife town sheriff type all the way up to the federal government, does this on a pretty systematic basis where, they go after people. And one of the ways they get you to cop to a plea, or one of the ways that they mess up, just what you're doing if they suspect something, is they say, oh, you know what, this money was gotten through ill-gotten gains and we're going to hold it. And then you have to fight for it back. You have to sue the government to get your possessions back. It's bad, and it just keeps getting more and more out of hand. So it's very good that this is happening. It shows bipartisanship or sanity, really, at its best.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, we've seen from the president and various law enforcement organizations almost a new push to increase civil asset forfeiture on the law enforcement end. But Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, when the high court declined to hear a case on civil asset forfeiture over a technicality in a Texas case, Justice Thomas actually wrote a 6-page dissent. How important was his dissent where he pointed the finger at civil asset forfeiture and said this is blatantly wrong?
Well, this is part of criminal justice reform. We don't usually think about it in those terms. We think about things like sentencing reform or even drug policy reform. But it's really basic to it because it provides money and really, really bad incentives for law enforcement to go after marginal cases and to do things that really, just don't make any sense. These are old policies that go back to English common law. It's nuts. And again, what's good about this legislation, it passed the House. There's a version of it in the Senate that should be voted on shortly.
These are bipartisan bills, by the way, we should point out. And that's, one of the reasons they have so much support. And with a climate that is so politicized and so split down party lines, it is rare and nice to see something, especially coming from a place of liberty, that is actually bringing both sides together for something very positive. And talk a little bit about structuring. This is making cash deposits under $10,000, which a lot of small business owners have no choice but to do.
Yeah, well, structuring is most of these, a lot of the kind of suspicious activity reports that get filed by banks automatically get triggered around $10,000, a withdrawal or deposit of $10,000 or more. Then the government says, well, if you're actually, taking out $9,000 or $9,050 to get around the $10,000 limit, you're guilty of something called structuring. You're trying to avoid a law which is not a law, but you can get in trouble. And that's actually one of the things that former Speaker Dennis Hastert got caught on, because he was paying out hush money, but he was doing it to get around those kinds of reports. And again, that shows the weird incentives of a lot of these laws, which, as you were saying, they were designed to go after money launderers, racketeers, mafia, drug dealers. And it ends up snaring a lot of people who, for a lot of reasons, are moving money around, which is our right. And this is the weirdest thing about it, is that you get put into a position where you're saying, look, I am going about my business. And if you have something to charge me with, do it. But otherwise, get out of my face.
And it's very expensive for a lot of these people, particularly in rural areas, to defend themselves. Hence, this legislation looks like it's got a good shot